My name is Jeff Roars. I'm the CMO of Jobvite, and you are here for our Too Talented session. Very excited about this because it's a timely conversation about how to build diverse audiences. And if this is your first Too Talented, we like to bring somebody usually from inside talent acquisition and somebody from outside. And so we're really excited today because we've got two great guests. We have Kellie Payne-Spencer, who works at LCMC Health, and Jeremy Bird, who is currently heading up community at Lyft, and in past lives has worked on the Obama campaign building audiences and communities there. So it's going to be a great conversation. Before we do get started, I want to remind you we are in the middle of our Summer to Evolve. So this is week number 7, and all the content is free. And in fact, the next 5 weeks are going to be great. We've got offer to onboard next week, internal mobility, content strategy, AI and automation, and we finish up with analytics. So we hope you'll join us. And this week, in fact, we have a couple of other great sessions, one in which we'll be getting into, from a technical standpoint, how you build audiences. And then Friday's Recruiter Real Talk is a chance for you to just talk with your peers about the subject. So it goes wherever the conversation leads, and we hope you'll consider joining that. You can register for any of the sessions at thesummertoevolve.com. Now, without further ado, let me welcome Kellie Payne-Spencer. Kellie is joining us from New Orleans. She is the AVP of HR System Talent Acquisition at LCMC. Kellie, are you out there?
I am here. Good afternoon and happy Wednesday.
Excellent. Happy Wednesday to you as well. Really excited to dig in here, but as we do with all our folks, we usually like them to put into context their organization, and then I get to ask one of the summer favorite questions. So tell us a little bit about LCMC.
LCMC Health is a health system based in New Orleans, of course, with legacy hospitals incorporated into that system. So it's a familiar walk for those in the New Orleans community who have received quality care over the years, and we are expanding bit by bit, and being at the epicenter of COVID-19 has been such an event for both the community and us as healthcare givers. So it's an exciting time to be a part of the organization.
Excellent. And I immediately zoned in on your summer favorites because I was surprised it's taken us over half of our programming to get to somebody who lauds the push-up. So talk to me about your love of the push-up at the ice cream truck.
There we go. The push-up one, who does not like orange sherbet, right? And then you have the packaging of it with the reds and the blues and yellows, all those dots. It drives some parents crazy, but the taste is so refreshing, you can't help but love it.
That's one of those items that like takes you back immediately to like a moment in time. So is there a moment in time from your childhood that you immediately recall that during the summer?
Absolutely. I just remember we didn't have a pool, right? The things kids are afforded nowadays, but we did have nice sprinklers, and getting that push up off the ice cream truck and running back to the sprinklers and just staying there. You have the cool item in your mouth and the water just going all over you. Just fun times.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let me invite our second guest to our Too Talented. Jeremy Bird is the VP of Public Engagement at Lyft, and as I mentioned, he had been a national field director for the Obama campaign and the 2012 re-election campaign. Jeremy, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent. And where are you joining us from today?
I am at my home in Oakland, California.
Excellent. And I'm interested, in your current role, how that connects with audience and community. Can you provide folks with a little bit of context?
Sure. I'm relatively new. I started a little bit under a year ago at Lyft. I came out here from Chicago. As you mentioned, have background in community organizing and politics. I was a national field director for the Obama campaign, and then I ran a firm called 270 Strategies for about 8 years before coming out here. And I work on our policy team, so I'm focused on a team that does community partnerships, our social impact, all the corporate social responsibility work that happens on my team, and we're focused on building the community amongst our 2 million or so drivers across the country, the folks who ride, as well as our scooter and bike programs, and so as well as allies and other folks throughout the community that we work with on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent. And I noticed your favorite vacation spot off the grid, and it's capitalized Rainy Lake, so it must be a specific place.
Yeah, it's just the Boundary Waters, kind of north of Minnesota in Canada. My wife's grandpa actually built a little cabin on an island there that's totally off the grid with solar powered back in like the 60s and still exists. So it's where you go to have no one find you. And that's my favorite place to go.
Excellent. Well, really do appreciate both of you joining us. Again, I'm Jeff Rohrs, CMO of Jobvite. I have some skin in the game here because I wrote a book called Audience Marketing in the Age of Subscribers, Fans, and Followers. So the topic of building audiences has been near and dear to my heart for a long time. Before we get started, if you do have any questions, I'm actually right now opening up my Q&A panel. So audience members, feel free to put your questions directly in there. I'll pepper them in throughout the conversation that we have today. If you garner any social insights, please feel free to tag those with Jobvite S2E on Twitter, LinkedIn, or your favorite social media. And we are recording all these sessions. We post them both at thesummer2evolve.com and on YouTube. So feel free to share those with friends and colleagues. So without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Kellie, we'll start with you. You know, I've come to the world of TA and recruitment by way of marketing. So audience has always been something important for marketers, but made more so important in the age of social media because, and especially going further back with email, because you could build an audience that you could reach out to at a very low cost. In the talent acquisition and recruitment marketing space, that's very analogous, but there's also that desire to have folks on call for opportunities. So what are the ways that you think about audience building in your current role or just overall as a talent acquisition professional?
Wow, that's a loaded one because that's sort of like dealing with the gatekeeper, right? It's who am I speaking with? What do I want to get across? And then thereafter, how does our messaging, our branding, that activity and experience, how is it applied and then beneficial to the audience for either the short term or the long term? Right. So when we consider an opportunity for someone, let's say a career event, right? What goes into that marketing to attract talent, and then the interaction within the actual experience or event itself. What's the takeaway? How did you leave candidates feeling thereafter? You have to consider that on the front end in order for your event and then your hiring activities to be successful.
And, you know, I believe that, you know, the attention of an audience is earned, so it's something that you can't just assume. How do you most successfully attract that initial audience within the world of healthcare? And then what are the ways in which you sustain their interest over time, and if they don't get that first job opportunity with you?
Wow, you know, it's a telling time to talk about just that. You know, there is, I hate to use war for talent, but I will, because it is a war for talent, particularly those critical care providers that attend to the unknown that has presented us with COVID-19. But the initial piece is what makes your organization unique. And it all goes back to culture, right? People are really concerned about, and as we should be, how we treat each other with dignity and respect in all roles and at all levels. And so those key pieces from a multidisciplinary function perspective, thinking of who is involved in caring for one, much less a multitude of patients, especially as we plan for influxes of patients coming from all different areas. And then we're dealing with the unknown of the disease. So we have to say, and think about what makes our organization unique. What do we do differently from others? So as we apply the benefits, the compensation, the types of skill set and modalities that will be delivered to this particular patient's care, considering all that organization, healthcare or otherwise, what makes you unique, innovative, cutting edge to contribute to the care and wellness of our patients in the community.
So that culture piece must be analogous, Jeremy, somewhat to the world of campaigns. Your culture is really set at the top, and whomever is the candidate, you're representing the platform on which they stand. But unlike Kellie, who's dealing with an organization that is a long-standing history in the community, you're dealing with a campaign for the presidency who, there's a candidate who's unknown to the large portion of the United States. So how does that impact your efforts to build audience and community right at the outset?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Kellie said is, kind of what your brand is and who you are, whether it's a company or campaign or wherever you're trying to attract talent, is going to be a huge part of who you're able to recruit and who's even looking at you, who's even thinking about applying. In a political campaign, you have a candidate, and so the brand gets defined a little bit, right? The value set is defined by what party, and then people who understand, who that candidate is. I always think back to when I started working for Barack Obama in the South Carolina primary, and the early days of 2007, when people really didn't know how to pronounce his name, and we were supposed to lose. The folks we attracted were, in some ways, they were attracted by who he was, and we had to sort of tailor who we were looking for what our brand was. So we weren't looking for people with the longest resume, because we weren't the candidate that had the longest resume. We weren't the establishment, right. And so we had to build a bunch of folks who hadn't necessarily done this before, but who shared a common set of values and were willing to take the risk, and who knew that the job could be over, several months after that, it might not continue. And I think that's true, in the setting I'm in today. People look at our company, look at Lyft, and, there's a brand there. There's a culture that we've created that attracts certain people. And I think that you can't disconnect the two, whether it's campaigns or in the corporate world.
And I'm intrigued because you do have the additional challenge of often having to wrestle these folks away from an opportunity that may pay a lot more, and it's on their career path. And this is a diversion from that perceived career path. So how do you go about that conversation, or get them into some sort of audience messaging campaign to create the cadence that eventually sways them to become a part of the campaign?
Yeah, I think that's that's always a huge challenge for campaigns or nonprofits or maybe startup companies that maybe can offer a longer term payout, but you have to convince folks that it's there. And I think, number one, you have to be honest about it, right? I mean, we don't want to get too far down the road before people realize, hey, wait a minute, that's how much I would make. I mean, you sort of need to be open about it early on. And I think what we're able to do in a campaign setting is really you speak to the values, and you speak to the ability to work and get paid for something that you really care in and believe in, and believe is helping make the world better, no matter who you're working for. And I think you've got to really push on that. But you're right. I mean, especially when you're looking at building diverse audiences. When I was in South Carolina, you get a lot of young African Americans who politics seems closed. They hadn't been hired, and it wasn't a trajectory on the career path. So you're graduating from the University of South Carolina, and you're going to go. Your family wants is put a lot into your education, and you're going to go to law school, or you're going to go on a path that has a clear financial payout, certainly, and to convince somebody to take a diversion from that to go work for somebody that is unlikely to win in a presidential campaign that's going to end several months later is a really tall order. But I think it's really all about those values, and then helping people see long term how this might help them in their career, and really thinking about my career path. Like, I went to divinity school, got my master's of theology, did community organizing, then got involved in politics, and then where I am today. It's like, I don't think in this day and age that there's, unless you're going to be a lawyer, be a doctor, that there's this sort of, I do this, then I do this, then I do that. It's like, take the opportunity to do something that will really help. And the one thing about a campaign to sell people on is you're going to manage people, and you're going to manage budgets that are way beyond what you should be doing. To be honest, if you're going in the corporate world, you're going to have to sort of like buy your time, but you're going to go in this place that's a little bit more like open to you, just because it's going so fast, and you're going to learn a ton in a short amount of time.
Sure. I'm interested in maybe the analogy here, Kelly, with Jeremy's world in the campaign. The risk is of a career path that person has envisioned, and this is going to deviate. Right now in healthcare, you're obviously dealing with a public health crisis and a very real risk. How does that impact how you communicate with the candidate pool, how you go about interviewing? What do you have to do extra to instill in them the confidence that the organization cares, the organization has their safety and interest in mind, but you're going to do the utmost for your patients?
We focus on letting them know they are safe, and the measures that we take to demonstrate that across the continuum of healthcare, and not just clinicians, it's everyone. You know, it's the person who's non-clinical who still has to go into the office every day, be it for, you know, processing reports, what have you. It's operationally across that continuum. Again, everyone is safe. So do you have PPE, the personal protective equipment, to, you know, ensure that I have some type of caution presented to me as an employee that I remain safe? And then for the patient, helping them to understand that, yes, we are the care providers, but to protect you and protect your family, here's the way we have to do it. So, you know, it's been a lot of conversation around that as well. Yes, we've applied your traditional recruitment tactics, such as, you know, being the first to get to that top talent. But at the same time, we have to add that additional layer of communication, and then again, demonstrate it. We are concerned about you. And I'll tell you something that has been profoundly effective within our organization is providing those measures to ensure that they do still get paid and can get through life. You know, taking the opportunity to the different measures with the CARES Act to, you know, make sure people have their compensation, make sure they can still work if they want to, and repurposing some talent. You know, you flow pools that have been created across the healthcare spectrum for people who had to, you know, work outside of their comfort zone, right? And consider, hey, I may not, you know, clean the cafeteria traditionally, but this time calls for that, just that. And it's letting people know up front as they consider the opportunity. You know, healthcare is not just about clinicians, but at the same time, in healthcare, we're still hiring. And that puts us in a totally different perspective as far as the job seekers, right? They've been, hospitality, especially here in New Orleans, has been extremely difficult to kind of re-engage into the workforce. And, you know, putting that forth of, yeah, actually we have a touch of hospitality in healthcare, and here's what it is. So it's presenting things outside of the box, non-traditional, helping others to realize that healthcare is still hiring, but this is what we have in place to keep you safe.
Great. Mary has a question for you both, and I think is a great one. How much customization do you look at using with regard to generational candidate targets, be it Gen Z, Gen X, millennials, retired, veterans, etc.? So maybe, Kelly, let's start with the Gen Z piece of this, because I think an interesting part of your recruiting challenge is you've also got to be nurturing that next generation, let's say, of nurse practitioner talent who might not even be certified yet. So how do you engage them, and ultimately what opportunities do they have with your organization, you know, out of the gate?
Out of the gate, entry level, particularly with a situation such as what we're faced with the pandemic, is interesting is no other word. There's no other word to use, and that you still have to cater to those generational differences, right? You have some workers, the more traditional, even beyond baby boomers who are preparing to retire, some baby boomers who are preparing to retire. And now we have new nurses at the cusp of Gen Z and the millennials entering the workforce. And I know early on in the first apex of the pandemic, we were faced with, do we let new grads go into these critical care areas? Right. Probably so. But do we have the preceptors to protect not only the newness of what this clinical career is and care delivery is for nurses, but also to protect their own license, right? To make sure we're doing the right thing as far as healthcare. So we have to consider those capabilities and competencies of the new worker, that they're more into theory and methodology, learning what they, doing what they learned in school versus someone who is a seasoned professional who could stand to assist them as they work in critical areas.
And Jeremy, from your perspective, as you think about those different generational audiences that you could potentially bring on a campaign, how did you tailor the messaging in order to develop those audiences into actual staffers or volunteers?
Yeah, and I think this is true at Lyft. It was true at my consulting company and true in the campaign trail. I've actually had more success with getting younger people, in part because the business that I've been in has been, a little bit, the lifestyle is tailored more towards young folks, right? The traveling on a campaign or some of the stuff, in politics has generally, but I found with younger folks, whether it's Gen Z or, millennials, when you're recruiting and retaining, there's a lot. Yes, compensation is a part of it, and even if people tell you it's not, it is. But it's also the values, right? I mean, it is having like a values alignment is how we recruited most of the folks that came to work at my consulting firm, and took, even got them to work for us when they could have got paid more in some other corporate job. The experiential, like what are we investing in them, and what's it going to be like? What's their day going to be like? There was a lot around like how do we set up the office, how free flowing are we, how do we let people have more sort of independence and flexibility in their work, and then how do we really invest in their leadership and development and empower them. And there's a lot of folks who, I always make the joke that the millennials on my staff when I worked at the consulting firm, they wanted to be running the place the second day they were there.
Sure.
And you had to be not afraid of that, right? Like you can be really afraid of that. It can be annoying. But I think there's ways to lean into that, right? And it's about creating an atmosphere where they really. Our challenge was always, how do you get more seasoned professionals and
Oh, I think I might have lost Jeremy. Kelly, are you still there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. We'll see if Jeremy comes back in. I was going to actually go to something you had said when we had our prep call, and it kind of goes back to the culture. Welcome back, Jeremy. We're rolling with the technical touches. No problem. We're just shifting gears a little because Kelly had said something in our prep call about how, if you're going to build diverse audiences, if you're going to build a diverse workforce, you really, it almost has to start from the top. And I'm very intrigued about that connection to the idea of audience building. So can you elaborate on that Kelly?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'll share gladly an experience I had just recently. I was contacted by a caregiver that I recruited years ago into a leadership position, and it was a random in touch. Hey, how's it going? Hey, I'm looking for something new, and this is what's important to me. And this goes back to the question that you just asked, and thank you for that question, Mary, about, how do you cater to generations? And this is someone who is, not at either extreme of the spectrum, kind of right in the middle and still middle management career, but she was looking for something else, not because of what she did as far as the tactical piece of her job, but she wanted to work in an environment where the executive team, the officers, even board members of that particular organization were reflective of the people that worked, that delivered that service. And I think as we consider audience planning, it has to be that we have to get to that level of detail in incorporating what others look like, what are their beliefs, right? Because if we are interjecting our personal beliefs or surrounding ourselves with who we're most comfortable with, be it abilities, be it whatever it is that what is diversity to you, be conscious about removing that unconscious bias by having those that lead versus those that are serving, have it to be a reflection of what's truly the makeup of this organization. It's people talent, it's people resources. And to get that type of question helped me, because I want to work in an environment where the people who lead me, they understand what I have the potential to go through, what may be before me, because they're similar or like me. That's profound, especially nowadays.
Absolutely. And Jeremy, I'm interested, you'd already kind of alluded to the fact that from a campaign standpoint, just because of who Barack Obama is, there are certain folks that it's very easy to recruit in there, and it gives you a certain built-in diversity. But as we lost you, you were starting to talk about some of the more senior folks. I'm interested in how you draw that experience and diversity within that audience to a campaign.
Yeah, and I think I've worked on Democratic campaigns, which just for the nature of the breakdown of the electorate tends to draw more diversity of talent on the staffing side, but it really hasn't always been that way. And I think part of it goes back to what I said early on, which is it's not seen as a career path for people, particularly folks. I grew up in a trailer park, and no one talked to me about I wasn't going to political fundraisers or connected, and so it didn't seem it seemed like something that was for other people to work on. And so I think that number one is to get out there and say, no, this is something, whatever your industry is, this is a place that, for young people of color and for people that are coming from lower economic means, this is a place where you could really thrive. And how do you create that message? And so that was always important. At the same time, saying other folks who might want to change careers or whatever, here's what's, here, you could really find a place over here that might really hit your values. And I think what Kelly was just saying about people and who's attracting them really matters. I mean, it really does matter. Like in my team right now, our chief policy officer is Anthony Fox, former Secretary of Transportation in the Obama administration, former mayor, Charlotte, African-American guy, who has created a team that reflects the diversity of the country and reflects the diversity of the population, the communities that we're serving. And his approach is inclusive. And I think when people are coming through the recruitment process, when they're understanding who's on the team, that certainly helps. And you're putting together a team, really thinking about, I think the way that Kelly put it is right. Like, you can look at your overall stats and think about how diverse you are, but it's really about leadership too, right? It's not just about the overall diversity of your team, but do you have folks in those leadership roles? On the campaign, you have somebody in a leadership role that's focused on veterans outreach, who comes from, who is a vet. You're going to have more luck, recruiting other vets to come work on your campaign. So I think that's really important.
So Matthew's asked a question via the Q&A panel around internal mobility. So if we focus on the internal employees as an audience, what he's interested in is, ultimately, have you seen programming, audience building with regard to those internal folks, both to create opportunity for them, but also to build a more unified culture that draws on their experiences and strengthens in that way. So you're nodding pretty vigorously, Kelly. I'll go to you first, and you can share your thoughts there to Matthew's question.
Absolutely, yes. That is great. It goes back to when we talk about attracting that talent based on experience, and for me, it's very personal. Just as the two of you are in new roles, new organizations, I'm very similar, in a similar situation, but I'm in my hometown, and coming back to New Orleans and being able to recruit others to come home to New Orleans, it's been just that. It's the experience of what the local culture is. It's the experience, as I said earlier, of legacy health systems, legacy health hospitals that are now a part of a system. Even though we're rebranded, we're still well known in the community. And it's that tool or those types of tools that you use to attract people to your organization. Go on, the experience, especially a great experience, right? If they've had relatives that worked for the organization, which I've had in this instance. If we've had, some type of patient care that's happened at a particular location where, it was very endearing. It may have even been difficult, but they remembered the promising moment that was given to them, that they experienced either through the care of their loved ones or even themselves. Draw on that, right? And that helps with diversifying the story that's told, not just from the perspective of this was a success or this is how they may have transitioned, but this is what I experienced and this is why I'm sharing the story. That relates to culture, that relates to a different type of story that's reflective out the community.
Sure.
We definitely take advantage of it, I tell you that.
Excellent. Jeremy, how does that work both in the campaign structure, and then how do you think about it in terms of Lyft? That question of internal mobility.
Yeah, if I'm understanding the question in the comment, yeah, I mean, I think, number one, like people want to see, right? Young people especially, but I think people want to see what's their path, right? How am I going to move within this, organization? And do I see others, moving up in a way that I can sort of, strive for? And so, I think you need to be very intentional about the career pathways for folks. And, I think especially in the work that I've done, it's not so linear to understand what's next. And so, the thing that happens on a campaign, which is really fascinating, is people get hired to be organizers, which is kind of the entry-level position often in the world that I come from, and then you get promoted to be a regional director. That's like the next level up. There's no management training almost ever in these organizations, but they're totally different. Being good at one is not necessarily being good at the second.
Yeah.
And so, and in a campaign world, because it's coming so fast and people just sort of like throw you in there and expect you to do it, there wasn't much training when I got involved in it. And we did a thing in 2012 on the campaign where we brought in all these executive coaches that coach, leaders of, companies and whatnot to coach our folks who are being moved in these positions that they didn't necessarily have the training to do. You've got to support them. And I think especially, we're doing that now at Lyft. There's a whole program for, folks in our department across the company, people of color, to make sure they're getting the right mentorship development paired with the right folks to help really train them and walk them through the path that they can have within the company. And again, how do you recruit people? Well, if you have people that work for you that will, that believe in your mission, believe in the culture, and that you've invested in, and that they've seen go from entry level to now being, a leader, then they see that could happen for them too. And there's probably no better way to recruit.
Sure. So I want to take it back to the start, the recruiting side of this. A big part in building your audiences, it certainly seems, is being able to see yourself in that environment. And as we had spoken prior to today, Kelly, one of the things we started to talk about is how that impacts your career site, how it impacts the content you create, the stories you create. I can think, Jeremy, in the campaign environment, it's leveraging social to provide a variety of perspectives from people of different races, different colors, different genders, different service, veterans, etc. I'm intrigued about those assets on the front end that are important to building an audience. So Kelly, how critical are those in this story of building diverse audiences?
Very, very. That's simple, right? Can you see yourself here? One of the job search boards does that well. Can you see yourself working here? And they, just do the whole plug of what's their brand, what's their title, and it's up to you to decide to follow them or even to figure out what's this company all about. But I think it's great to apply the picture of, but live and in person, especially once you get that interview, right? This is your make or break. This is your chance to see if you're going to truly be a part of this organization. And as you talk through and answering questions, own that, because that gives you the insight that you need to make a decision on it. It's one thing to recruit, right? We're attending to the basics, meet the basic qualifications, do your salary expectations, meet the benefits. We do all the basics, but as a candidate, you really have to do that deep dive with yourself and say, okay, I know the basics of what I will receive. However, what is it day to day? What's in it for me? Our favorite radio station, right? What's in it for me on the day to day? And can I meet those goals here with this organization? Because as Jeremy said earlier, yes, it's about compensation, but at the same time, it's about, having support. Am I working somewhere stable? Am I in an ethical environment, especially times that we're in, right? We have to consider those things because that in turn impacts our livelihood. But as recruiters, we have to think about the talent that's coming in. Will that person and their characteristics, their performance be reflective of what we want to deliver and vice versa?
Excellent.
And I would just add to that. I think one of the things is like being honest. So people will see themselves in your organization. Like if they come in, do those interviews, they're going to know, right? They're going to walk around. Obviously not right now. I guess they're going to video around, and they'll have some sense, right? Okay, like if I'm coming to this organization from a Latinx background, and there's no other people, who come from that same background, I'm going to notice that, right? And so use the strength if you have that, right, to make sure you're showing people, hey, there are lots of folks like you here, come from the same backgrounds, socioeconomic, whatever. If you don't have that, be honest about it. So like when I worked at 270, ran my company, we were mostly people in their late 20s and early 30s, and we were specifically looking to recruit folks that had a different perspective, that were more seasoned. And when they come in, they look around and it's like, listen, we recognize that this isn't exactly the age cohort you're coming from. That's good. We want that. And so we were looking for people who kind of wanted to be around a different cohort age-wise, but we were just not trying to hide the ball.
Well, I could continue on for a long time with a lot of questions here, but let me wrap with this one that it will provide maybe some tactical ideas for folks on the phone. A big part of building diverse audiences is in looking in places you don't normally go. So do you each have some stories or some tactics that you use to go into places that you don't normally go, be it media, social, physical locations, etc. What is that extra effort that gets you the full breadth of diversity you're seeking as an organization? Maybe I'll start with you, Kellie.
I would say it's familiar to me, but it wouldn't be familiar to someone else to think, oh, I could recruit here. If I'm looking to push wellness, I'm going to the lakes, the parks where people are physically fit, and I'm looking to engage in a conversation with that person who is a clinician, who has a steady workforce, their peers, right, who want to follow them, right, because typically they're modeling the way, and like the Pied Piper, they'll get other people to follow them, right? So it's thinking of that. If I'm thinking of, the super cool peri-op team that gets it done, and then afterwards they have their favorite dive to go, I'm going to hang out at the dive, right? To get to know them, get to know who they're hanging around, and let them know, hey, we have opportunities. So it can sometimes be so very basic. And a lot of times, you're the walking billboard as a recruiter, right? You are, hey, I'm with LCMC Health. This is what I do. And that opens a conversation to say, oh, I never saw it that way. And then it leads to you're connecting, you're networking, you're engaging them with conversations, and you get some great talent that way. So there's all kinds of tricks and tips to do it, but it's knowing, again, going back to your audience. If I'm going out to the lake or to a park, I'm probably going to get some fitness gurus out there. If we're pushing for wellness, let's see what we can do to attract that talent.
Excellent. Jeremy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I got two random stories that just came to mind. One is recently I'm trying to hire, I run our public affairs team, right? So there's looking to hire a public affairs director. You can go to the traditional public affairs firms. You can kind of put it out there. You can go to LinkedIn. You can do a bunch of stuff to push out there. But I actually knew that I wanted somebody that came from a more digital and creative background because we had more of the traditional public affairs talent around. And so I went out with a much different search and specifically was looking at creative firms or people that come, from more of a storytelling background. And I just knew what I wanted, even though the job title wasn't necessarily different. So I think it's not always just what's the title, but what are you really looking for. But then sort of very differently is I think back to the campaign days, and I think I told you a story before, Jeff, but when I went to work for Barack Obama in South Carolina, there were not a lot of Black South Carolinians who had worked on campaigns. There had been a lot of presidential campaigns there, and we really wanted the staff to reflect the communities we were working in. But if you went out to the traditional people who worked on campaigns and their networks or whatever, you were going to get the same folks. And so I remember just going through Facebook and anybody who had ever liked a Barack Obama page in South Carolina and just messaging, and we would do this, there were 3 or 4 of us, we would just message people and say, hey, did you know you could work in politics? Especially seniors in college who were graduating, like coming up. And we were just doing everything we could to kind of try to reach people in a different way. Traditionally, what people would say during campaigns is like, oh, well, send that to, get the elected leaders, and even in South Carolina, the Black elected leaders to send it out to their networks. But again, that's not getting outside of the network of people who are in politics. We needed to get outside of that network. We needed to get to the community groups. We needed to get to folks who weren't thinking about this as their career. And once people say, hey, wait a minute, I could work on that. Like, that's a paid job. We started to get like really people who understood the community, which is what we were trying to get. We were not trying to get people who understood politics. We were trying to get people who understood people and who could connect with them. We could do the training after that, but if you can't do the training and you don't have the investment in training, you won't be able to find people that have kind of a more non-traditional background.
Excellent. Kellie, you're going to get the final word because Pamela has a question, and that is relative to your answer just now, I think, around wellness and interesting ways to recruit. How do you do that in a remote environment?
Jeremy kind of answered that question just now. It's so many people have kind of let their guard down because we've gotten so comfortable with social media, and you do just that, Pamela. Go to whatever your topic is, whatever your potential audience could be out there, and see who's making comments on the blogs. If something that I've gotten into as of late, and everybody around me is shocked, is I'm starting to bake. And so I'm learning how to do it a little bit better by reading the comments and getting some feedback on some things that aren't necessarily in that recipe. And you would do just that for your audience remotely. Find out who's liking the pictures, who is commenting on different recipes, or in this instance, if we're looking for career options, find out who's making comments about the company itself or about the role and what it can be like versus what it actually is through the presentation of a recruiter. You'll get some great insight and you'll be able to make a decision.
Excellent.
Kellie, what's your favorite? What are you baking? What's the best?
I'm starting with something simple. I want to get, my grandmother used to make the best pound cakes. So, her spirit is kind of in me, and I'm like, I'm going to do a pound cake. I just had a friend of ours made one not too long ago, and I was like, man, this is good, but not quite as crusty on the outside as I'd like it to be. So it's coming, and it's coming soon.
Well, as soon as we're able to visit, we will be down in New Orleans to taste test the pound cake, if that's okay.
You'll have more than some pound cake, I'll tell you that.
Sounds good. Well, as we wrap, I want to thank you both for participating today. Really do appreciate it. Thought it was a great conversation. And for those who are interested in learning more about what Jobvite offers in terms of recruitment marketing, diversity and inclusion, just visit jobvite.com and you can learn all about that. As a reminder, we do still have more sessions on this topic of building diverse audiences. Tomorrow, more of a technical dive on how you can do those things with Jobvite and telemetry. And then Friday, peer-to-peer conversation, our Recruiter Real Talk on this. And then Kellie, as if you were, perhaps reading my mind about parks, I'm very excited because next Thursday we have got a break room, or actually next Friday, I'm sorry, we've got a break room session with Jim O'Hare, who played Jerry, Larry / Gary Gergich on Parks and Rec, one of my favorite characters who evolved with the show and was always kind of the smiling face. So we're going to learn a little bit more about him, that role, how it evolved, and excited to have that conversation. With that, I want to thank you for joining us for another Summer to Evolve session. For more of our programming and to register, go to the Summer to Evolve. Thank you, Kellie. Thank you, Jeremy. Everybody have a wonderful day.